Diogenes of Sinope, the infamous Greek philosopher, has long fascinated historians and thinkers alike for his radical approach to life, which stripped existence down to its most basic elements. Unlike other philosophers of his era, who built elaborate theories and sought prestige, Diogenes chose a life that mocked social convention, valued self-sufficiency, and championed the idea of freedom through minimalism. His story begins with an exile from his hometown of Sinope, where he had fallen afoul of financial corruption scandals in the minting trade. Forced to leave the city, he carried with him a singular resolve: to live a life guided not by the trappings of wealth, reputation, or societal expectation, but by the pursuit of unfiltered virtue and authentic living. The cornerstone of Diogenes' philosophy was radical self-sufficiency, or what he called autarkia. He famously lived in a large ceramic jar, often described as a barrel, in the marketplace of Athens. This wasn't simply an act of eccentricity or a bid for attention. It was a deliberate illustration of a profound truth. The fewer dependencies one has on external goods, the fewer chains one carries. By reducing his needs to the bare essentials, food, clothing, shelter, Diogenes demonstrated that most human anxiety, striving, and suffering arise from attachment to luxuries and social approval. Every possession, every expectation imposed by others becomes a potential source of bondage. In choosing a barrel over a house, Diogenes highlighted the liberating potential of minimalism. Freedom is not found in accumulation, but in elimination. Diogenes' approach extended beyond material possessions to social norms and moral pretensions. He rejected the hierarchical values that dominated Athens, which prized wealth, noble lineage, and public recognition. He scorned these markers of status as illusions, tools by which society convinces individuals to surrender their autonomy. By living openly in the public eye, engaging in behaviors deemed inappropriate such as eating, relieving himself, or performing other natural acts without shame, he exposed the artificiality of social conventions. Each act was a lesson. The power of society over the individual rests on manufactured ideas of propriety, which can only function if one consents to them. By refusing that consent, Diogenes demonstrated the essence of philosophical freedom. Perhaps the most famous anecdote illustrating his philosophy is his encounter with Alexander the Great. The young conqueror, intrigued by Diogenes' reputation, approached him while he lounged in the sunlight. Alexander asked if there was any favor he could grant the philosopher. Diogenes' response was striking in its simplicity. "Yes, stand out of my sunlight here." Diogenes encapsulated the essence of his teaching. True power and happiness, he implied, come not from external authority or wealth, but from the ability to live unencumbered by them. The sun, freely available to all, symbolizes the universality of freedom and the futility of seeking fulfillment from what others can give. Diogenes also challenged the philosophical elite of his time, particularly the followers of Plato. Where Plato built a system of abstract ideals, Diogenes sought practical application in the real world. He famously carried a lamp in daylight, claiming to search for an honest man. This gesture, part satire, part profound statement, critiqued the moral hypocrisy he perceived in society. The lamp symbolized the need for clarity, for an unflinching examination of life, and the courage to confront truth wherever it may lead. His method was not theoretical discourse, but lived examplin, embodiment of philosophy as action rather than abstraction. Minimalism, for Diogenes, was inseparable from ethical practice. By stripping away unnecessary possessions and desires, he created space for reflection, self-control, and virtue. Each rejection of luxury was a lesson in autonomy by refusing to depend on another for approval or material support. One reduces vulnerability to manipulation. The modern implications are clear. In a society obsessed with consumption and status, Diogenes' radical simplicity exposes the invisible chains that wealth, technology, and social comparison place on the mind. Each new possession, each approval sought, becomes a form of indebtedness to forces beyond one's control, eroding personal freedom and psychological resilience. His minimalism also intersected with an acute awareness of mortality. Diogenes did not pursue fame, wealth, or comfort because he understood the temporal nature of existence. Every attachment carries with it the inevitability of loss, disappointment, and dependency. By removing unnecessary ties, he minimized suffering and anxiety, creating a life less susceptible to the fluctuations of fortune. In essence, his burial was both a physical and philosophical safeguard, a means to achieve equanimity by reducing the scope of desire. Another critical aspect of Diogenes' practice was his emphasis on authenticity. Unlike contemporaries who performed virtue for social recognition, he embodied it in all circumstances. His disregard for appearances was not mere rebellion, but a declaration that true freedom arises when one aligns actions, beliefs, and needs. When an individual's conduct no longer depends on validation from society, freedom becomes immediate and resilient. The burial becomes a metaphor for the self-contained life, a space in which external judgment cannot intrude and internal integrity is preserved. Diogenes' lifestyle also served as a critique of education and the pursuit of knowledge as ends in themselves. While others labored for degrees, honors, or influence, he prioritized experiential wisdom over abstract learning. He questioned whether knowledge divorced from action and moral integrity was meaningful. A person might recite philosophical principles or master rhetoric, but if they remained enslaved by desire or social expectation, they were not free. Minimalism, in this sense, is both a method and a test. It exposes the unnecessary, the performative, and the superficial, leaving the individual confronted with their true capabilities and limitations. In practical terms, Diogenes' philosophy suggests that the path to freedom is iterative. Each desire resisted, each attachment discarded, is a step toward autonomy. It is not a passive withdrawal from society, but an active engagement with reality on one's own terms. Modern readers might draw parallels to voluntary simplicity, decluttering, or mindful consumption. Yet Diogenes' lesson is more radical. It is not only what one owns, but how one thinks, behaves, and consents to societal norms that determines freedom. The external burial is a symbol. The internal work is far more demanding. Importantly, Diogenes also exemplified the use of humor and absurdity as philosophical tools. He deliberately provoked others, using outrageous acts to expose contradictions and unexamined assumptions. By laughing at societal norms and pointing out inconsistencies, he demonstrated that freedom is not merely the absence of physical chains, but the liberation of perception. A mind that can perceive the arbitrary nature of social constraints is inherently more powerful than one dominated by fear or ambition. In sum, the life of Diogenes provides a striking analytical case study in the pursuit of freedom through minimalism. His rejection of materialism, social expectation, and performative virtue illustrates a path to autonomy accessible to anyone willing to confront discomfort, abandon dependency, and embrace authenticity. Every barrel, every lamp in daylight, every sarcastic gesture was a teaching tool, emphasizing that true liberation is found not in external acquisition, but in the relentless pursuit of internal clarity and ethical self-sufficiency. For anyone seeking to understand the psychological mechanisms of freedom, Diogenes demonstrates that minimalism is more than a lifestyle. It is a profound strategy for cultivating resilience, integrity, and autonomy. By reducing desires, resisting social coercion, and living with deliberate simplicity, he exemplified the possibility of a life unburdened by conventional anxieties, one in which the mind is sovereign and the self is undivided. His life remains a template for those who wish to understand freedom not as a philosophical abstraction, but as a practical lived experience. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to The Fictionist to explore more analytical perspectives on historical thinkers and their radical ideas.